Hello everybody, so let's go over briefly how to open and work out some basics in Audacity, which is one of the audio editing softwares that are free out there and we can use, and we're going to be using in the computer lab for tomorrow on Wednesday. But first thing we need to do is find it, so either it will be pinned to the taskbar like I have here, or you'll have a desktop icon. If it's not in either of those places, then we need to find it, in which case we'll type in Audacity in the search bar. All of the computers in the Emerging Technologies Lab are Windows 11. This computer is a Windows 10, so the search bar will be in the middle, just as an FYI. But it should bring up the same thing either way, so we want to click on that app, and then it will start opening the software. We'll get this kind of intro greeting here. We don't need to worry about that. This checkbox may have already been checked, in which case this might not pop up. But either case, if it does, just click OK. And now we need to talk about some basic things here. The first of which is how to save. We always want to make sure we're saving things. We want to go to File up here in the top left, Save Project, and then Save Project under that, or we can just hit Control S. Now if I do that, it will bring this up. I have already an existing file here, so we're just going to save over that. Yes, we want to overwrite it, and now we have it saved. You can always hit Control S at any time, and it will automatically save the project for us. We always want to do that because there's nothing worse than having all of your hard work disappear because the computer crashed and you hadn't saved it for the last 3 hours or so. But when we've gotten past that, before we even start recording or bring a waveform audio file or whatever we want to work on into the space, we need to make sure that our recording setup is how we want it to be. So we want to make sure we go up to Audio Setup, and then look at these two device options here, Playback Device and Recording Device. Playback Device is simply where the audio is going to be played back to you, i.e. through your headphones or your speakers or whatever the setup is. So we want to make sure that this is where we want it to be. I have everything routed through a Yeti microphone on my home computer, so that's all where I want it to be. And then our recording device, the recording device is also the same Yeti microphone, so we're good to go. And whatever your setup is, if you are recording straight into Audacity, you always want to make sure that these two options are what you want them to be. Otherwise, you either won't be able to hear the audio and or it won't record from the source that you want it to. But both of those are okay. So let's go ahead and record a tiny bit of audio here. Test, test, test. All right, and we have our little waveform. Now, if you wanted to bring audio into the space that wasn't recording for this here, let's go ahead and exit out. And we'll be done. We could have also hit Control-Z, and that will bring it back, and then Control-Z again, and it will undo that. Same standard fare as just about any other software you can use. Control-Z will usually undo just about anything, although it won't go back an infinite number of steps. It only has so many undos before it doesn't remember everything that you did, so keep that in mind. But say we wanted to import audio, so we don't want to record something, we want to bring in an external audio file to use. So we want to go again up to File, and then down to Import, and then we want to import audio. Don't need to worry about any of these other things, we're just concerned about audio. Again, we can hit Control-Shift-I if we really wanted to, but for the sake of demonstration, we're just going to go through this little drop-down menu here. If you do this, there's already several audio files and other things in here. We're going to go ahead and click on just the test that we have right there. We're going to open that, and we have our waveform here. Now, the very next thing that we want to consider is how we navigate this, how we can play and pause and do all that. You can use those buttons up here. They'll seem fairly intuitive. I'm not going to lecture you guys on what, this button does versus what a pause button does, but there are some key distinctions we need to keep in mind. So there's a difference between pausing a set of audio and stopping a set of audio. If I go and hit play on this by either clicking the button or hitting space. Shift space will play it once, but you hardly will ever use that. If we go ahead and hit space, testing 1 2 1 2 1 2. All right, we go ahead and it plays the audio. You will notice when I hit the space bar again, the little cursor that it had, which is represented by this dark black line, went from here at the end of the audio clip and it snapped back to the beginning of the audio over here. So I'm going to do that again, just so you can see. Testing 1 2 1 2 1 2. If I hit pause, and you notice it jumps all the way back over here. A lot of the time, that's what you want. You want to jump back to the beginning part of a clip, but say you want this cursor to stop right wherever you ended because you want to do a little bit of editing, or it's just you find it annoying if it keeps rubber banding back to the beginning of the clip. So we'll go ahead and hit play again, but this time, instead of hitting the spacebar to stop it, we're going to hit P to pause it. I'm going to use that as a short key because going back across the screen is unnecessary, but you can do the same thing with the button up here. So we're going to hit play, or we're going to hit spacebar to play it, and then instead of hitting it again to stop it, we're just going to hit P to pause it, and you can see the difference. Testing 1 2 1 2 1 2. All right. As you can see, our little cursor here has paused on where I want it in the clip. Now, that's really helpful if we want to do a lot of editing and other, smaller adjustments here, and we don't want to have to constantly keep moving the cursor back and forth. You will notice that there's two of them now. There's our green one here, and then the solid black line over here. That one we can move around and do whatever, and this green line will not change. So if we are ever to resume the clip, this green line is where it's going to start from. So if I hit pause again, or hit play again, excuse me. Oh, it actually disappears. Essentially because we're at the end of the clip. But test play 1 2 1, and I pause it, and then I hit it again 2 1 2. We resume from wherever we started off from. So if we want to resume wherever our pause bar is, we go ahead and hit P or the pause button again. I'm going to go ahead and hit spacebar because that clears everything. But that's a way of getting around this clip in various different ways. Because if you hit pause 1 2. And then hit it again, or if you hit stop and hit it again, it will snap it back to the beginning or wherever your cursor was before, versus play. Oop. 1 2 1. There we go. And then if it pauses, it will give you this bar, and if we hit pause again, 1 2 1, it will resume wherever we left off on that. Let's go ahead and clear it. Yeah, so those are some ways of getting around, but what if your audio clip is really, really long? This is only about 4 seconds, so we don't have to do a whole lot of legwork to try to zoom in and out on different sections we want to work on. But if we ever did want to do that, how would we need to zoom? There's a couple different options here. So there are the zoom tools up here, there is the zoom out, and then zoom in. So if we were to click on that, it will automatically zoom us in a little bit, and then this will zoom us out. And you obviously notice the same as the other buttons, it will give you the little keyboard shortcut next to it. So zooming in is Control 1, allow us to zoom in really, really far. We can see all the individual nodes of the sound file. And then if we wanted to jump all the way back out, it will go ahead and go to the maximum possible in order to see the whole project. We don't necessarily need to do that all the time. Those are pretty extreme lengths. So one thing that's really helpful is if you just hit Control, you hold it down, and then use the mouse wheel, you can zoom in, and it's a lot more intuitive rather than using a bunch of buttons all the time. Another thing that's very helpful is, yes, if we want to fit the project width to whatever screen space we have available, we can hit this button, and it will automatically match the sound file to exactly how much screen space we have, regardless of how long it is. So if this clip was, over an hour long or something absurd, then we could snap it to that entire length. Let's go back to the very beginning. All right, there we go. Okay, so that's a way we can get around. You can have these buttons up here to zoom in and out. This one will snap the length of the project to the size of your screen, and then Control and mouse wheel will give you a little more intuitive sense, but it will go wherever you have your cursor. So if we do it there, it will kind of get towards the middle, and not so much. It's a little bit finicky. But those are some ways of getting around and seeing what you're looking at. And of course, we always want to save. Now that we've done all this, we're going to go ahead and save project, or Control S. Either one will do the trick. Now let's talk about how we can actually edit everything that's going on here. Now, there's a couple different ways of doing that. One that I do want to address is we have up here a couple different tools that are selected. So this is a selection tool. You will notice that the waveform looks a little bit different if I select this one versus the selection tool. So we have this, which is kind of like the little cursor you'd see on a standard word processor, and then the multi-tool, which allows us to do some other things. I'm going to remain in the multi-tool mode because it allows us to do a lot more stuff. The selection tool doesn't allow us a lot of versatility. We can kind of just select things and move around, but the multi-tool allows us to do that as well. It's just a little bit busier. Okay, so now that we have this, how do we actually cut this up? So say if we're looking at this, maybe we want to get rid of this bit of silence here at the beginning, and maybe this bit of silence here at the end. How do we actually do that? So there's a couple different ways. One is we can go ahead and highlight it all the way we have here. And if we want to, say, get rid of it entirely, we can cut it. And we can do that a couple different ways. We can go up here and go to Cut, which is Control X, and it will just delete wholesale the entire thing, which is sometimes what we want, but other times maybe we want to hold on to that. Maybe we just want to split this difference and see what's going on here. So there's a couple different ways of doing that. One of those ways is by hitting Control-I to split it. Now, split and cut are not the same thing. If we were to cut this, Control-X, it will completely get rid of it. But if we hit Control-I, it will simply split the track in two. And sometimes that's what we want. Because say, for instance, if we wanted to zoom out and we want to, say, stick another clip in between this bit of silence here at the beginning and this little bit of test audio we have here towards the end. Say we want to stick something between those two, but we want to keep those other two audio tracks intact. One of the ways that we can do that is by moving it around. Now, you have to make sure that you're in the multi-tool mode for this. You can hit F6 for that. It's a quick way to getting to it. We can also hit F1 if we want to go back to selection mode, but we're going to stay in multi-tool for right now. Because it's important to be in that mode, because if you try to do this in selection mode, nothing will happen. And that is, in order to move this around, we're going to hit Control again and hold it down. And you notice that it goes from this kind of word processor little icon to these sideways arrows. That lets us know that we can shift and move this around on the time frame. Now, say we wanted to just simply duplicate whatever this track is and stick it back in here. That is a very intuitive operation. We simply hit Control-C for copy and paste, and then paste the resulting track back in wherever our cursor is over here. And if we want to bump these together, we go ahead and hit Control, making sure we're in multi-tool mode, and then sliding these back over, and it will give us this yellow line down between the two different tracks whenever they are right next to each other, whenever they cannot possibly be any closer. If we were to play these back, then this section right here, where this yellow line is, it would be seamless moving from this clip to this clip. They would be a seamless transition, no one would notice. Relatively speaking, if it's a little bit of an audio spike, then there can be some distinction, but these are as close together as these two audio clips can get. But no, we don't really need to do that for right now. So we're going to hit backspace to delete that, and then slide this back over here. Actually looking at it, maybe we want to improve the quality just a little bit. Testing, 1, 2, 1, 2. If we listen to that once more. Testing, 1, 2, 1, 2. You can hear there's a tiny little bit of background noise. So all these little kind of granular details in the middle, that's a little bit of noise that we want to get rid of. Now, how do we get rid of that? We could go through with our pen tool here and kind of smooth out all of those, but that takes a lot of time and won't result in a very polished product. So what we want to do instead, I'm actually going to get rid of this over here because we're going to try do some other things real quick. Align that up. And let's go ahead and get rid of this tail thing at the end. So we want to polish up the audio that's in this clip, and there's a couple ways we can do that. The simplest way, and for the sake of this tutorial is probably going to be the easiest, is we want to go up to Effects, and we want to go down to Noise Removal and Repair, and then go down to Noise Reduction. Now if we click on this, it'll give us an error message. I'll say to select the audio for noise reduction to use. Okay, so we need to select a couple different things here. One, we need to select audio that gives Audacity a sense of what, when we say noise, what are we referring to? What do we as the user consider to be noise that we want to remove? Because Audacity does not know that intrinsically. We have to tell it what we want it to take out. So instead, we're going to record a little bit of room tone, just the ambient noise in the room where I am in, and we're going to use that as the basis for removing sound from this clip. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, and we don't need a lot of that. We just need a couple seconds. This is probably even too much, or not too much, but just an unnecessary amount. But now that we have this, let's go ahead and click on it. We need to make sure that this is highlighted. And if you double click on any clip, it will automatically select the entire clip for you. But now that we have that, let's go up to Effects, go down to Noise Removal and Repair, Noise Reduction, and then we'll get this dialog box. And we'll have a couple different steps. One, we want to get our noise profile. So we're going to, again, telling Audacity, this is what we consider to be noise. And the second step is once we have that, we need to actually remove the noise from the clip that we originally wanted to clean up a little bit. But first, we need to get our noise profile. So we're going to do that. And now Audacity has learned, okay, this is what you consider noise. So we're done with this. We're going to go ahead and delete that. And then just zoom back in on this audio clip here at the beginning. With this, we're going to select the entire clip again. Again, we can do that just by double-clicking on it. Go to Effect, Noise Removal, and repair, noise reduction, and now we're going to go to step 2. So this will actually get rid of the noise based on a couple different parameters that we put in. First of which is, again, telling Audacity what we consider to be noise in the first place, and then how much we want to reduce it and how sensitive we want that reduction to be. We're not going to worry about frequency smoothing or bands for the sake of this video. When we're looking at noise reduction, that's in decibels. How quiet do we want it to get as a result of this reduction? And we can see over here on the left-hand side, relatively speaking, in decibels, how loud this is. As you can see, it does not get very, very loud here. Kind of absolute scale. Going from 1 to -1. Our audio clip is not super big, so 6 decibels is plenty to try to reduce that noise. We also want to look at the sensitivity. Now, this is kind of the fineness of its reduction. If we make it really, really high, then it will consider every tiny little bit of sound information to be a candidate for noise. It will consider a lot of stuff, and it takes a lot more time. And this is usually useful for when you have very, very quiet audio and you want to be very, very careful about the noise you remove, because you don't want to accidentally lop off some of the audio you want to keep. So say you're whispering into your microphone for something, or it's a very, very quiet set of ambience and you're just trying to get rid of a little bit of noise, we probably want higher sensitivity for that, because the difference between this audio here and the little bit of granular noise that we can see is going to be very, very minimal. This will, or the audio waveform that we want to keep will look very, very similar to the noise profile that we're trying to get rid of. So we want to have very high sensitivity if we're trying to do something that's on the quieter side. On the flip side, if we want something to be, you're at a monster truck rally and you're trying to get rid of just some background noise that's in there, then you probably want the sensitivity to be very, very low, because everything else is going to be very, very loud. You need kind of a very, very, general tool that's willing to kind of hack off noise wherever you have it, and lowering the sensitivity will allow us to do that. But because this is at normal speaking volume, we can be comfortable with just putting it at 8, which is kind of towards on the less sensitive side, because we have, it's not that quiet, but we're not drifting too far. We're not at a monster truck rally. Again, don't worry about reduce or residue. Those are two intrinsic things for this property in Audacity that we're not going to worry about. One thing that I do want to point out is if your audio clip is substantially long, in which case trying to apply this process to something that's maybe 30 or 40 minutes, trying to apply that process can be time consuming, and it may not ultimately be what you want. So one of the things you can do is you can hit the preview button, which will let you know what it will sound like after you've applied it. Testing 1 2 1 2 1 2. Alright, and we can hear a little bit the difference there without having to bake in, so to speak, the noise reduction we're about to do, because we can press undo to do all this, but for longer clips, this process can take upwards of 5 minutes, because it's scrubbing through every little sample of the audio data to try to get rid of it. And if we don't have to do that, or if it's not really what we want, we can hit the preview and get an idea of, oh, maybe I need to fine-tune the sensitivity a little more, or the noise reduction needs to go up or something. But for this, we don't really need to, because again, this is less than 4 seconds. We'll go ahead and hit OK. And then with that, we've had it baked in, so if we go ahead and listen to it again, we're going to go back to the top and hit play. Testing 1 2 1 2 1 2. Alright, and we can already hear that a little bit of that static in the background has been reduced, even though on the waveform we can still see it here. That is okay. Our audio is a little more cleaned up. Alright, obviously we're going to go ahead and save one more time. I've hit Control S, but we can always go over here and hit Save Project, and all that's done. Alright, there's only one more thing that we need to do, and that is exporting this. Now, exporting is not the same thing as saving, because if we save this, when we go up here and we hit Save Project, that is saving it as an Audacity project file. And if you try to, say, open that in Windows Media Player, or iTunes, or any other media playing program on any device, it won't know how to read it, because it's not an audio file. To get it as an audio file, we don't need to save it, we need to export it. And specifically, the one we need to look at is exporting our audio here. Again, we can hit Control-Shift-E, but for the sake of demonstration, we're just going to use this little dialog box. So, if we want to, we're happy with how our audio form looks, we've cleaned it up, we've cut out anything we don't want to look at, let's go ahead and export it, clicking that button, and we'll get this dialog box here. And there's a couple different things that we'll need to look at here, but most of this is pretty straightforward. We're not going to worry about any of the stuff that's down in the audio options. That is more detailed than it's worth. we're just going to look at a couple things up here. The first of which is obviously our name. We want it to be clear and not duplicate anything. So if I go to browse, I already have something labeled test_1. So we're going to head and make this test_2 just for difference. We'll make sure that this is saved to the location we want to do. So this is saved to the projects file under test on my computer. So I'm happy with that. And then we need to talk about the format. Now there's lots of different formats that we have in here. And some of them are more useful than others for what you want to do with them. But largely speaking, the two you're going to use the most are the WAV file and the MP3 file. And you can notice that these audio options change depending on which one we're looking at. Don't worry about those right now. The main thing you need to know about these two files is that MP3 files are substantially smaller, but slightly lower in quality. WAV files tend to be quite large, but they have a very, very high bit rate is what it's called. They have a very large depth, and they sound really good, but they take up a lot more space. So if you're going to be presenting something in an all audio format, then putting it as a WAV is probably a better idea, because that's where your audience is going to get all of their information, and making that as high quality as possible is going to be the best move. But if it's going to be the audio for a video, where the video component is more what your audience is going to be paying attention to, then MP3 files will be fine. They won't be drastically different. It isn't as if this will sound like it's from the 21st century and this will sound like it's from the 1920s. The audio quality is not that disparaging. This just saves a little bit, and it doesn't quite have some of the bells and whistles, but it is fine for 9 out of 10 purposes if you're using it with alongside other media. Again, the main benefit though is that the WAV files are just bigger, and MP3 files save a lot more space because they're smaller. All right, but let's go ahead when we're satisfied with all this. Again, we're not going to worry about mono or custom mapping or the sample rate or any of the presets. One thing we do want to make sure is that this little bubble is checked, that we are rendering the entire project, because if we just rendered a chunk of this or just wanted to render a chunk of this, then we would need this to be slightly different. But since we're not doing that, we're doing the whole project. This is the only option that we have, and that's what we want. So let's go ahead and hit export. And there's not even any waiting time. It will sometimes show you a dialog box here in the middle of the screen if it takes a moment or two to kind of get its thoughts together, but otherwise there's not much that we have to do. So go ahead and see where our audio file wound up. So we're going to go over to our test file, and we can see that there is our test_2, and we can see the size that it has. This is compared originally to the WAV file we worked with, which you can see is substantially bigger. It's almost 100 times as large. This is 752 kilobytes, and this one is only 63 or about 64. MP3 files are much, much smaller, even though they don't sound quite as good. But when we have all of this in order, we're pretty happy with that. We have our test file, we have our various renderings. Go ahead and exit out of that. Go ahead and hit Control S or up in File, save project one more time, make sure everything's set up, and then we'll go ahead and close out.